What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Christ in Capital, the show that wants to encourage you to love God, love neighbor, and build something. I'm the host, Dustin Johnson, and this episode is going to be fantastic. Again, with me, I have Nathan Johnson. He's been on the podcast quite a few times in the past, and I think this discussion is going to continue down some roads that we've been in the past. So yeah, let's just see how this thing goes. Nathan, what's up?
Hey, Dustin. It's good to be back on Christ in Capital.
Yeah, you're in the middle of grading lots of papers, exams. I don't know if you guys do exams or that kind of stuff.
Mostly papers. So this is a nice break from that.
Okay, so I made you read another paper. So okay. All right. So do you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast or the YouTube channel?
Every now and then, I kind of follow Joe Rogan, and I like to see who he has on. I usually can't stomach a 3.5-hour podcast.
Yeah.
But you can listen to clips of some of the kind of the best parts. And that's always nice.
Yeah, I like that they do that as well. I'm also the guy who I'll tune in when it's someone that I want to listen to, or someone kind of points me to an episode with a certain individual, and they're usually pretty good, but yeah, they're super long. So we dove into this article about Spotify, Joe Rogan and his deal with Spotify, and I think just to kind of set the scene, I'm going to read a few paragraphs just to kind of get things going. Because I think this is going to go down a wokeness discussion. So let's just see. The article goes, a new report stated that Spotify employees are extremely bothered that the music streaming platform has not censored the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. According to Digital Music News, a self-described source for music industry news and analysis, Spotify employees are so angered about Rogan's free speech that they have threatened a full-blown strike if the company doesn't suppress certain Joe Rogan Experience episodes and topics. On May 19th, Spotify announced that it had reached an agreement with Rogan for a multi-year exclusive licensing deal that is reportedly worth more than $100 million. In the deal, Spotify gets the JRE full library, which adds up to nearly 1,500 episodes. Rogan's first episode on Spotify aired on September 1st. Immediately, fans of the massively popular podcast noticed that several potential controversial episodes were missing from Spotify library, including interviews with firebrands such as Alex Jones, Gavin McInnes, Milo Yiannopoulos, Charles C. Johnson, Owen Benjamin, and Carl Benjamin. On September 16th, Spotify held an all-hands company meeting where Spotify CEO Daniel Ek addressed concerns about alleged, quote, transphobic content that was on several of the JRE podcast episodes. So I thought this was interesting because we just got done having a discussion a couple weeks ago about critical theory, intersectionality, wokeness, and how it permeates society. And I think I've seen this coming for a long time, and I think most people have seen this coming for a long time. But the culture clash within these huge corporations is really starting to approach a fever pitch. You've got CEOs that are kind of C-suite level guys who are running the business. They know the ins and outs of the mechanics. They know all this stuff about the business and the industry, and then they push down certain functions of their organization to younger people who are more in tune with social stuff. They push down marketing and HR and all that stuff. And now there's this tension going on between individuals within these companies. And I've always thought, we're going to see this kind of thing eventually, where big organizations are going to be stopped from producing certain things, certain products or certain messages. And I think this was like the tipping point for me. I was like, all right, we gotta talk about this.
Yeah.
But what are your kind of initial thoughts about this whole thing with Joe Rogan?
Well, I've got a few, and I think there are some different avenues we could explore. It seems to me that there's a little bit of a clash here between the economic sensibilities of a company and the ideological sensibilities of a company.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously companies are created fundamentally to make money.
Yep.
And obviously they bought all the rights to Joe Rogan's podcast because that's going to bring in revenue. I mean, he's by far the most lucrative and famous podcaster in the world.
Yep.
And so, and he's got all these loyal fans. And one of the things that Joe Rogan has one of the platforms that he stood on is the fact that he's willing to talk to anybody. And even if he disagrees with people, he thinks that everybody should have the opportunity to say what they believe.
Yep.
And so that's why he's had such a great fan base, is because he's willing to talk to people that no one else, you can't find another interview with some of these people. So Spotify is probably going to get hurt financially if they don't cater to the people who would listen to Joe Rogan. And those people who would listen to Joe Rogan want to see all of his podcasts on there, even the ones with, Milo Yiannopoulos or Alex Jones. But then you've got people who are working at Spotify who see some of these more controversial figures as spreading hate speech, spreading lies, spreading things that are divisive or that go against the certain cultural mores of our time.
Yeah.
And so now Spotify is kind of caught in between. Do we appease our employees who are the enlightened ones because they're sensitive about all these things, or do we appease our potential customers who want all of Joe Rogan's stuff on there?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's just kind of the first thing.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think later on in an article, they had what is his name, Daniel X response, or his decision on the matter. He says others have concerns specifically over a recent episode. Oh wait, hold on. Basically, the article says in the case of Joe Rogan, a total of 10 meetings have been held with various groups and individuals to hear their respective concerns. Some of them want Joe Rogan removed because of things he said in the past. And then it goes on to say, Daniel X says, Joe Rogan and the episode in question have been reviewed extensively. The fact that we aren't changing our position doesn't mean we aren't listening. It just means we made a different judgment call. So he's basically stiff-arming them. He's like, no, we're not doing this. But which kudos. I mean, I applaud him. But it raises the question of how much longer will that kind of thing last? I hope it lasts for a long time, and I hope we have this recommitment to truth and to social decency, that we can have free speech and honest conversations with each other without fearing that we're going to be canceled.
Right. Well, and that's, I think the more optimistic side of me says that human nature tends, and this doesn't sound optimistic to begin with, but human nature tends towards what's going to be beneficial to itself, either because it'll give it more power or because it'll give it more wealth. And since businesses are created in order to gain wealth and power, at some point, it's not going to be lucrative or helpful for the company to continue to be cutting itself at the legs, because they're getting rid of people that just have fallen into disfavor for various kind of arbitrary reasons. I mean, the fact that Joe Rogan, who is an incredibly progressive liberal person, has fallen into disfavor because he's willing to have certain opinions about very few issues that this kind of new progressive left doesn't like. That creates this this instability that I don't think a lot of businesses can end up handling if they're always going to be changing to the whims of the woke progressive left.
Yeah. And it doesn't make sense either. Like, I think the idea is that, hey, we need to cater to the culture because the culture is, we need to have a good public image, but they've taken on a product with the Joe Rogan Experience, whose paying audience are people who are not. It's basically a window into what a part of our culture that doesn't subscribe to that mainstream, or at least is more open to questioning the mainstream narrative. So you don't reject your potential buyers your definite buyers for your potential public image. Like, I don't know. That just sounds
right. And I think there's a couple realities we have to recognize. There's a very vocal leftist woke contingent of popular culture that is the minority. I mean, it is the minority. And a lot of times they are calling out businesses that they don't even participate in.
Yeah.
For stuff, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, those businesses are going to realize that that's a contingent of people that we don't have to make happy.
Yeah.
That we can still make the profits we want because those people aren't going to shop here no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you it makes you wonder. Like, we're bombarded with all of that, all of the popular woke messaging via all the big sites like news and entertainment and whatever public messaging. But I hope stuff like this starts to bring people around to say, look, just because you're seeing it on these big platforms doesn't mean that's the majority of people's sentiment.
Right.
Right.
There's two examples that are really interesting that we'll see how they play out. The first is Trader Joe's. There was a high schooler who wrote a paper condemning Trader Joe's for the way that they name their products. You know, if you've ever been to Trader Joe's, it's kind of funny. So you have the Trader Joe's stuff, but if it's like Chinese food, it's like Trader Ming's, and if it's if it's like Mexican food, it's Trader Jose.
Yeah, and, I think I heard. Yeah,
right. And so there was this high schooler who wrote, like her thesis paper or whatever on how that's like cultural appropriation and how that's offensive to minority groups, and of course, like she's just like a white person, but so Trader Joe's actually issued a statement that said, like, we're sorry about that, and we actually were thinking about changing it anyway, so we probably are going to go ahead and change the names of our products and make it all streamlined. And it's like, okay, the reason why Trader Joe's is doing that is because it costs them little to no money, and they just don't have to have the hassle.
Yeah.
Right? But if somebody said, you're not allowed to sell ethnic food because that's cultural appropriation, like Trader Joe's is a California company, and so it's offensive that they're selling, Kung Pao chicken in the frozen section, then Trader Joe's would be like, okay, that's ridiculous. Like, yes, we're going to sell more than just American food in our grocery store.
Right.
But so that's one example of like a company that's listening to the woke crowd, but it's because it's not really hurting them to change it.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, Bon Appetit, which is like what was my wife's like favorite food magazine. They fired their CEO for woke reasons, and now they're only allowing contributors who are contributing, who are from an ethnic minority, contributing ethnic minority recipes. Those are the only things that they're allowing in their publications.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think a lot of people are just going to stop buying the magazine and stop going to the website and they're not going to be interested in it anymore because like they want recipes for food that they're going to eat. And if a food magazine isn't going to give them recipes for food that they're going to eat. They're not going to purchase that anymore. And I think Bon Appetit is going to find that this attempt to be woke, to please a crowd who probably isn't even using Bon Appetit's recipes to begin with, I think they're going to find that it's really going to hurt their business.
Yeah.
And enough businesses at some point are going to see the changes that they can make to appease people but not hurt their base. And they're going to do that, but they're not going to make wholesale changes, because those wholesale changes are just going to be bad for business. And in the end of the day, they want to make money.
Yep. And there's going to be like a clash because I think the general public will start seeing that all these changes that people were making were not because they had a kind heart. I mean, it wasn't because they just had like a sentiment, a business vision change where they wanted to be more altruistic and all of that. It was because, it didn't hurt me. Like that was the deciding factor. It didn't chop off one of my key revenue streams. But one distinction I wanted to make was, you've got like the Trader Joe's and the Bon Appetits. But with this Spotify thing, there's something eerie about the fact that this is coming for organizations that are in charge of communicating messages to large audiences. It's almost like reminiscent of the Reformation. I mean, like a situation where someone is deciding what information can be pushed out, right? We had this same discussion, I think, with the net neutrality stuff and all of that. But it's just, it reminds me of kind of the Tower of Babel. And I hope it's not judgment on us if God starts confusing our languages and certain messages can't be communicated and certain messages can. Maybe that's not the best, comparison to draw, but it's just, for some reason, it strikes me a little bit differently with these type of companies that, like these social media companies who are censoring messaging and what you can say, what you can communicate. It's a little scary in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. And this gets into, I think you're right, kind of the heart of the question, which is you've got just your everyday business and how are they going to respond to this new flood of wokeness, for lack of a better word, right now. But then when you're dealing with content platforms like Spotify, like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you're getting into this weird realm where are they publishers or are they platforms?
Yep.
And if they are publishers, then they have the legal right to censor.
Yeah. Yep. It's their content, essentially.
It's their content, and they're deciding whether or not they want to publish it. But if they're platforms, then it gets ambiguous whether or not they have a legal right to censor. Because on the one hand, you could argue, well, free speech doesn't mean that I can say whatever I want and everybody has to be happy about it. Or I can say whatever I want, everybody has to agree, or I can say what I want, everybody has to listen. All that free speech means is that I can say what I want and I won't be thrown in jail.
Right.
But Facebook and Spotify could argue that, well, we're not throwing you in jail. We're just saying you can say this, but can't say this on our platform. But the internet has become the new social sphere. Like it's become the new marketplace, or the new means of communicating to just the broad world.
Yeah, it's the public square.
The public square. That was the word I was looking for.
You could set up your soapbox here.
Exactly. And we would say that it's not fair, it's not right that if I went to the literal public square and I started speaking, someone can't come and bind my mouth and take me away, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Alex Jones has been barred from YouTube.
Yep.
And from Facebook and from Twitter. Okay. So if the internet is the new public square, then the argument goes, you can't do that to Alex Jones, and you can't do that to Joe Rogan. You can't ban their content from being accessed by anyone.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
but
yeah,
this kind of like plays into another discussion about, you know, basically you're poking at my libertarian sensibilities, where I want to say, look, they can do whatever they want. Let them do whatever they want. And to an extent, I'm like, yeah, that, I mean, they made that company, they built it from the ground up. And who am I to tell them what they can and can't do? Someone else should come over here and make another platform, and compete with them. But then it gets sticky because those organizations are the means by which you communicate your message to build that competitive alternative.
right.
So it's like it's a tough situation. I think I still fall on the side of, hey, they can do what they want, but I think I would be kidding myself if I didn't say that this was kind of a unique situation.
Right. It is. It's hard to find historical parallels because the internet is kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
But some people argue, and I kind of tend to agree with you, that in their business they can do what they want. And if you don't like it, just make your own. But we do have something against monopolies. And when you look at the Gilded Age, you had some of these monopolies were being created where, you own most of the steel industry. You also own most of the railroad industry. And unfortunately, if you're going to try to create a competitor, be a competitor in the steel industry, you're going to need the railroads to move your stuff. But the person you're competing against also owns the railroads, and they're going to start charging you 5 times more than they charge anybody else to use their railroads.
Yeah.
So the competitor has created a situation where they can make it impossible for you to compete.
Yeah.
Which is, why we have an anti-monopolistic sentiment written into law. And that's really the question about these major platforms is, are they a kind of monopoly? I mean, Google, for example, Google can direct people to whatever website it wants based on the algorithm that it writes.
Yeah.
So, so how, if you've got Google and Facebook together owning most of the platforms, how are you going to compete with that? How can people even find you on the internet?
Yeah. Yeah. But then you go down to the rabbit trail of, okay, well, who's in charge of policing that? Or who's in charge of putting up the barriers, and who's in charge of policing the monopoly stuff? And then you're pushing the monopoly power. You're basically just reallocating the monopoly power to a governmental entity, right? Someone's gonna. I mean, it's not like we're getting rid of the monopoly power. We're just repositioning it and giving it to people who are tied up in special interests and all that stuff. So that's why I that's why I hate. I don't hate government, but that's why I have so much, so many areas where I'm like, the government's just not the solution to this issue. But also neither is doing nothing when it comes to these like big platforms like Spotify and all of these big content communicators and platforms and all of that. I think the solution ultimately is the gospel. We keep, I've heard a lot of Christians talk about this, and they always get into the mechanics of how platforms versus publishers work and all of this stuff. But I'm like, look, the answer's always been super simple. It's the gospel. If the message of Christ crucified and Him buried, resurrected, and renewing people, if that would take hold, you would see drastic differences in society, because people would be bound by their own moral guides. Like it's not just, hey, I'm gonna get for me, and whatever happens to you, good luck kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which we will get into that will get us into the discussion about like moral obligations and which we've had in the past. But
right.
Yeah, it's a sticky subject, and we kind of like springboarded into. I don't know. We didn't stay with Joe Rogan, but I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great things to be wrestling with. No easy answer on this one, for sure.
All right. And you hit on a couple areas that I want to talk about the Gilded Age at some point in the future. So we're gonna revisit that. What's his name? Biltmore. What's his name?
Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt. He, man, that guy was crazy. He was awesome.
He's amazing.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
And all the public cartoons or all the political cartoons that we have about him are just like bashing him. But anyways, we'll get to that in another episode. So everyone go subscribe to the podcast. We're on YouTube. Share an episode on Facebook or Twitter. Talking about publishers and platforms. Just get it out there. Let's get this message out there. Christ, Him crucified, resurrected. That's the message that the world needs, and it's going to affect all areas of life, including business, economics, entrepreneurship, all of that. So go love God, love neighbor, and build something. Talk to you guys later.